94. I keep saying 70. Pardon me.
Okay, you're 94.
94. I can't
Okay.
believe that.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
That's terrific. And your wife is there next to you?
Yeah, she is.
And how old is Rhoda?
She's a woman, so she's not telling you.
I'm sorry, that was a rude question to ask. Oh, I'm so glad you're feeling well enough to talk today, Dick.
Yeah, yeah.
And, let me tell you very quickly that when we had our class of 1969 reunion in October, I recorded a lot of people talking about their time in school. And of course, so many of them mentioned you and how important you were to the school and in their lives. And so I've been looking forward to talking to you a little bit for this little audio project that I'm doing. It's sort of a little podcast type thing.
I can't believe that I was important in their lives. They were important in my life. Everyone there, that class. That was a very interesting class, which I never have forgotten.
Wow. Tell me, to the extent that you can, tell me what you remember about taking over. I know you have said that you were the youngest principal at that time ever in New York City.
Right. Did you know what it was to become a principal, what you had to do? Okay, let me fill you in. At that time, it was civil service. To take any of the tests you had to pass, you had to just sit down in a separate room in a different school in Brooklyn and take a written test. That written test was two parts. And to complete the two parts, it took 2 hours. 1 hour, one part, 1 hour, another part. And then after that, there was a vocal part where you were interviewed by three current principals. And after that, you had to go into a classroom of a school that was not your school, observe a class, and do a write up of what you saw. And then you were if you passed all of that, it was about 2.5 years, you were put on a list of available to become a principal. At that point, you had to see whether there was availability. And in my case, there was because the current principal at that time just retired. And I thought, wow, this is a godsend because I don't think there was another art teacher or art chairman who became a principal. And by the way, you had become before that a chairman of an art of a department. So I was one of those who was the only arts chairman.
Wow. That's amazing. And how old were you when you
I
acceded to that?
wasn't 40, I was 39. So I passed and I was put on a list of available people to be chosen. And I was very pleased. I went to the Board of Education and I said, I hear that the principal of the High School of Music is retiring. I've got an art background. I'm available. They laughed me out of the office. They said, are you kidding? We'll give you a different school, a vocational school, and you wait your turn. And if another principal wants to transfer in who's more experienced, we'll assign to him. We'll assign him. Well, what could I do? I went back home discouraged. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was an art teacher who said, you know, that the Board of Ed is in a problem now. They've changed who's in charge. The community is now in charge. The community is in charge of all the schools, and the high schools are in the hands of the local school board in matters like this. I said, fine, what happens now? I said, well, there'll be local interviews and you will sit for an interview if you're called. I said, fine, I'm available for the interview. And I was. So I went and I was one of many who went and sat for the interview. I remember people telling me there was a joke. One principal, um, he said, I speak Swahili, and that's why they should choose me. But that's what they were not interested in. In any event, I had a nice interview. I thought I was concerned about the local community. I said, here's a school in a community, but not involved in the community. And when I went home, I said, I thought that was a good point, and I was pleased. And I sat back, and then I got a phone call from this friend who was an art teacher, happened to be black. Uh, and he said, well, what do you think of community control now? I said, I don't like it. Why? He said, because they picked you. I said, what do you mean they picked me? I didn't hear anything. He said, well, you didn't hear? I'll get back to you. Get back to me. And he said, there's a teacher in music and art who was the head of the social studies department who had taken the principal's test, passed it, and the local superintendent told that person, don't worry, I'll hold the job for you. I said, well, are you able to do that? He said, oh, no. And they're not able to do it either. And so the next thing I knew, I was called in and I was appointed principal. So I went to the Board of Ed, happy. I'm the new principal of the school. They said, ah, when you know, we're not giving you the principalship of that school. We're going to give it to the next available principal who is experienced and is now principal of a school. And what happens to me? You'll get a vocational school when it comes up. I went home discouraged. He called me back. He said, I mentioned that to people, and they said that's illegal. You were selected by the committee to become the principal, and you are the principal. No, okay, that's how I became the principal at that school.
Wow, what a story of ups and downs. And
Yeah, ups and downs. And then when I came into the school, I knew I was the new principal of the High School of Music and Art. After being there for about a week, I got a phone call from somebody who called himself the teacher in charge of performing arts, who asked me, when am I coming to visit? I said, I'd like to visit, but I'm busy. I'm a new principal of music and art. He said, what do you mean? You're the principal of performing arts as well. I said, what are you talking about? He says, the principal of music and art is the principal of the High School of Music and Arts. I said, but you're a vocational school. We're an academic school. He said, no, no, we became part of your school some years ago, and we're waiting for you to come down. And there's a board of advisors here that's pretty angry that you haven't come down to say hello. I said, okay, I'll be right down. And that's how it started.
that's an hysterical story. They didn't even tell you that you were principal of the second school.
Not no.
That's so
Two,
funny.
two parent associations, two teacher UFT chapters, two union chapters. Everything was double.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And
And I
now,
was,
what year was that? What fall was that?
well, it was 5 years after I was appointed. So it was 60, uh, 67.
Okay, that's amazing. Now you said that you had some memory of coming to music and art and meeting me, who was the head of the student government at that
Oh,
time.
you were the first three students I met who were out on the sidewalk in the street in front of the school, and you greeted me warmly. You said, "Welcome to the Titanic," and like, "Herr Captain." And I said, "Oh, this will be interesting."
I
Yeah, what were you
remember,
doing there? Why were you there?
well, I had been elected president of the student government one of those years, and I was quite happy and proud. And I have these very strong memories. As a high school student, you don't know how someone becomes a leader. And so I remember going into your office, and I would come in with an idea or an issue or a problem. And it always shocked me that as we were talking about the problem, you would pick up the phone, you would call whoever you needed to call to resolve the problem. By the time you were finished on the phone, you'd hang up the phone, the problem would be resolved. And I say, is that how leadership works? That's just an
Oh,
amazing thing.
yeah, that's surprising. I
Now,
learned, however, in my end of that conversation, that things didn't work like that so easily because performing arts was a was there was three levels: vocational, academic, and commercial. Vocational high school was performing arts, and academic was music and art, which meant the courses were different. The different academic courses, there was no dance or whoops, you still there?
yeah, can you see me?
There was no dance at, at music and art, and you're not in the picture.
Okay,
Lost your
I can see
picture.
you. You lost my picture?
Yeah.
Okay, I still see you,
All right.
and
Well,
let's see.
was I
Um,
touching?
you're looking good, and I can see you.
All right. Well, let's continue for the moment. This performing arts was a vocational school. It had limited academic courses. It had no, there were no arts courses there other than dance and music and art, of course, and dance and no theater. So they were different schools. And I discovered that just the same, I was now suddenly in charge of both. There were parent association meetings I had to go to. There were teacher meetings I had to go to down on 46th Street, and I had to do that regularly. And I was a bit surprised by it.
I bet. Now, some of those years were they must have been very tense and very hard for you. We know that in the 1968, there was the Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and the communities took over.
Yes.
Do you have memories of those days?
Oh, yes. And lots of memories. We had a strike, as you know, and music and art was on strike. We had a big teachers union, and the teachers union was out in front of the school picketing. And as the principal, I was their leader. I stood up on the top of the steps to lead the picket line. And a woman came along with two or three other women and said she's there to open the school. And she said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "Yes, you're Bella Abbotsford, because my wife and I have been involved in your protest about Vietnam. We know all about it." I said, "You know who's down there below the step? It's your union." I said, "What are you doing up here? You belong down there." Uh, I said, I'm surprised that you are taking this stance. She said, "I believe that the school should be open." I said, "Well, we have an auxiliary arrangement where we have a school that's accepting our students for instruction and accepting our teachers, and they're getting instructions." She said, "Nevertheless, I'm opening the school." Well, what can I do? That's what that's what she did.
Wow. So what was your response to that? What did you answer?
uh, she said, "Do you know what I do?" I said, "You know what you do. You're a labor lawyer, and those are your people down here. And I'm surprised that you're standing up here." Well, I made up for it some year at the end of the year, but that's another story.
Well,
Because
later on, yeah,
graduation,
yeah, go ahead.
I said, at graduation, when we had the faculty up on stage at Carnegie Hall, she came, I'm prancing up to sit down. And she said, "Where's my seat?" I said, "Down there with the students. That's where you belong." And she,
Hmm. Now, that same year, once we got back into the school, at a certain point, students, we decided that we were going to take over the cafeteria. And I
which we
remember,
did.
which we did, and it was a very tense kind of time during that.
Yeah.
What's your memory of that?
My memory was that I was the new principal, and I picked up the phone and called the superintendent. I had a superintendent to whom I was responsible, and I called him up. I said, "Students just took over the cafeteria." He said, "Call the police, get them out." What he said, "Call the police, get them out." Not going to be easy. He said, "No, you have to do it." Right. So that's what I did. I called the police.
We
What,
have the article,
what are you holding?
the article.
Oh, there's an article about that.
Oh, yeah. There were articles about all kinds of protests. Throughout that year, one protest after another.
We have the articles.
Oh my gosh, you kept a scrapbook of all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
You may be.
Yeah. We had lots of articles that year. There was one after another, all kinds of things.
Wow, so that was, I don't think any of the students knew all of the details
Uh,
that you were forced at that point. You called up the superintendent and you said, "What should I do?" Because he was the one who controlled your job, right?
and I was a new person, a new assigned to principal, was on temporary assignment.
Yeah.
You had 3 years to go before you would before you were fully assigned, and that's what I was under observation for. And so I was always there for that.
Wow. And yet it was more complicated because those of us who were inside, we didn't get arrested. When the
No,
police came, we, I think, went out the window or something.
whatever you did, I wasn't arresting students at that point.
No, I think everybody understood that you were not going to let the students be arrested.
Yeah, and that always wasn't always the case. That was another case with some students when there was a sit-down strike in the lobby because of the there was a semi-annual concert every year. And that first year, some students sat down in the lobby and were going to block the whole concert. And I said, "Well, you're not going to be able to do that. You have to move away, let the concert go." And they were not prepared to do that. And I was prepared to call the police to get them moved, which I did, and they moved. And that was that.
Huh. Boy, that was a lot of pressure on you as a young principal to make all of those quick
That was
decisions.
only one. There were lots of different events. Man, all kinds. Students were sitting down and carrying on all over the place. And I had my hands full. And I tried to be as calm as possible in resolving them. And there was a little student group that came into my office one day, and they would came in with protests, and I said, "Won't you have a seat? Let's talk about this." Well, they were stunned. Have it. We should sit down. Yes, you should sit down. let's talk about it. And that's what we did.
Yeah. I was reading the other day, I know one of the students who was in the class behind us, Donald Reeves, wrote a book about his experiences. And I wonder if you
Not
ever
only
saw
did
that
he
book
talk, he
or,
wrote a book about it.
yeah, did you read that book or?
He went, we have the book. He wrote a book, not a book. He went to
No, it's a
Cornell,
full book. Yes, he did.
and Cornell called me up, the president, and told me about this student Klein because of the book, and asked me what do I think. I said, I think you can have your hands full, because my with this young student was that he would say one thing and do another, and he was very active all over the city, cutting his own classes in English and getting good grades just the same. I said, you, you'll listen to him, you'll have your hands full. And indeed they did.
Wow. Now, many years after music and art, I hope you remember this, at least I remember it very clearly. I know you continued your career as an advisor to arts schools, and I visited you when you were helping to consult with the Duke Ellington School in Washington,
Uh,
D.C., and I was so happy to see you then. Tell me about that
that's
job.
right. Well, I'll tell you, before that job, there was another job. I was at Music and Art for 18 years. During that time, a movie was made. You remember the movie Fame?
Of course.
Of course. Well, that was about the school. At that time, there were 5 schools throughout the country that had any kind of arts programs at the high school level. And the principals of those 5 schools, we all got together and we formed a network of specialized schools. And that lit a fire around the world. We began getting calls from everyone, from all kinds of countries. We had students from different countries writing the characters in the movie that I had to answer because they were writing specifically to a character in the movie. And that um, became so popular that I was being called all over the country to explain how we do these schools and what we do and why it works. And one of the places that came to me was Miami, Florida. A whole group of people came one day and sat in for the day and watched what I did, working with the students and with the staff, asking to see the program, asking to see how we did them. And in fact, they did a nationwide search. And then they called me and said, would you be interested in helping us by coming down here and helping sit down and start a school like yours? Except that in addition to high school, the students in this school will go right on to college and graduate with a college degree. And we said, well, it'll be difficult, but let me think about it. I said, okay, I'll give you 3 years and then I'm coming home. And they gave me 3 years and I stayed 7. And I retired from Miami. And that school's still going. It's called the New World School of the Arts.
Of course,
They're
Michael
doing a
Tilson Thomas
senior.
and yeah.
But, but then, after 7 years there, came Washington, D.C. The Duke Ellington School was also seeking at that later time, 7 years. And not a director, but someone to help them because the school was in trouble. They had a principal. And I said, well, I'm not going to become a principal again. I've done that. So they made me director, responsible directly to the superintendent of the school system there for the arts with an office at the school. And I became the director responsible to a committee that they had, which included a parent who had been a parent at Music and Art and whose work I had done and who had recommended me. So I stayed there, and I stayed there for 3 years because it became difficult for us because my wife stayed home and I stayed there, and we went back and forth all the time. And what I did there was connect the school with the college, the local college. And when I left, that was the arrangement. It was an interesting thing with that school, however, because what I was used to was a little different than what I found when I first came in. When I first came in, I think it was the second day, I called for a meeting of the head office and at 10 o'clock the next day. And guess how many showed up? None. So I said, well, I see what the problem is. It took me a little while, but I think I straightened it out, made a connection with the college, which now exists.
Which college was that?
The local, what's the college down there?
Georgetown or American
Georgetown.
University or?
Yeah, no, no, no.
It was Georgetown,
Okay.
where I met with the head, and he thought it was a good idea.
That's really wonderful. So you had this great career after music and art, which
Well, then after that, I was the person to call in the country about art schools because we formed a network of specialized schools. And that happened when one day there were five of us sitting around and we realized we were the only five in the nation of a school like this. And so we created a network of art schools internationally. Canada and South America still exists.
mm,
Yeah.
that's just so wonderful, Dick. Well, in thinking about your time at music and art, um, is there something that you had hoped that we would talk about that we haven't had a chance to talk about, or that was very important to you?
Well, there were a couple of things. Um, the Board of Education gave me a hard time. We had extra like these days. We had in order to handle all the courses we were giving, arts as well as academics. And that was the idea of combining the two divisions. And when we proposed that idea to have a division together, the Parent Association of Performing Arts was very much opposed to it. They did not want to leave their building of 600 students. And, they had their own Parent Association. And they were quite active about and vocational, but not, we're not going to move. Yeah. Oh, no, I was just going to mention. There happened to be a new chancellor at that point, on that road. And I went and spoke with him, and he thought it was a very good idea that they combine. And so did the people at Lincoln. And it took a lot of discussion and a lot of work, but finally all agreed, all outside agreed. It's a wonderful idea. Let's do it. And it's always done.
Were you still
Otherwise, it
the
wouldn't be.
principal in 1984 when they moved?
Oh, sure. I I was behind it.
Oh,
We had a group of advisors at Performing Arts, and I sat down with them, very responsible, professional people in the arts, and they thought it was a wonderful idea. And everyone I spoke with thought, and especially Percy Sutton was the principal at Manhattan,
Oh,
Manhattan, yeah, And he had been objecting to it, cutting the budget all the time, year after year, not letting the budget get through. And I sat down with him and explained, here's the population of the school. You know, look at the population. We don't distinguish between black and white. We take whoever qualifies, that's who gets accepted. And look how many of those young are from your district, and you're paying it. And he looked at it and he said, "You know, you're right. Okay, I'll support you." And he did. And that's what made.
Wow, that's really a great story. So that was really probably one of the most important things, of course, that you did was create this Fiorello H. LaGuardia School that then is now a stalwart a member of Lincoln Center and one of the most important parts of it.
I think it's more positive.
Yeah. Well,
Helpful for us.
the first principal of the school, Benjamin Steigman, when I first came in there, invited me for a luncheon at his house. Uh, there, I was only the third principal. He didn't like the second principal, so he pretty well. But he came in, he had good ideas, and that one of them was to get together with Rolling Arts and Lincoln Center, and Lincoln Center loved the idea. They said, "How about a new building? We've been talking about a new building just behind us for some years now, 2 years, but it's never been in the budget. It's take it out." So that encouraged me to go to Percy Sutton and show him that it involved students from his district. And Mayor Lindsay was there, Mayor Koch was there, and by the time we had a groundbreaking, I had all of them, including Mrs. LaGuardia.
Oh,
Everyone.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Dick, that's
And
a
by the
great
way, let
story.
me tell you about that because I like doing that. I went to the Board of Ed. I said, you know, it's time for groundbreaking. And they said, well, we're not going to support that because the budget's never supported. I said, well, support it, rearrange it. They said, you can't. Okay. I found that we had a student in the school whose father was the district police lieutenant, whatever, in charge of that area. And I called her and asked, would your dad be interested in closing the streets around the school for groundbreaking? And she said, well, I talked to him. And he came in and he agreed, oh, sure, he could do it. All right. And then I began writing. I wrote to the mayor and said, everyone's coming to the groundbreaking. Here's the date. Can you make? And I wrote to everyone. This is LaGuardia. Oh, yes, she can come to it. And from one to the other, I said, this one's coming, that one's coming. They're all coming. And they all came. And we had a groundbreaking.
Wow. What a great thing. I'm sure there's plenty of wonderful pictures and articles about that.
There.
Oh, that's a great story. So the streets were closed and the groundbreaking happened, and then a few years later, the school was created.
Yeah.
Wonderful, Dick. Well, you know, tell me how you're feeling these days and how you're doing.
Well, you know, I felt better, you know. I'm 94 at this point. So I used to be younger than that. And I felt better.
When is your birthday? When are you going to be 95?
November 29th, 1929,
Did you say September or
December 29th.
December 29th, 1929? Wow. Well, that's amazing
You know
that
what? It was a good run. I really enjoyed the run.
Oh, well, it's so
I
wonderful to see you.
appreciate your interest. That's really wonderful.
It's great to see you, and I will try to incorporate some of this into the work that I'm doing, the audio history of our class and of the school, and I'll send you the results of it.
Thank you very much. That would be
Oh,
wonderful.
okay. Thank you, Dick,
I
and
agree.
thank you, Rhoda.
Well, in here,
I can't hear Rhoda. She's sort of off the mic.
okay,
Hi.
this, I'm
If
just here, just, a placeholder, I think. Yeah, but the thing was seeing the video,
I,
before
I
that.
can't I can't quite hear you, Rhoda. You have to point the
She was
computer at
saying
you. Yeah.
Okay.
she was saying the best part of life was hearing the video that you showed
Oh,
them.
that's
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
thank
That was
you.
good.
Everybody
Yeah.
really enjoyed doing that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let me say goodbye then, and I'll hope to be in touch again soon.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks
thanks.
very much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.